If your peptides have stopped working or they're just not hitting the way that you thought they should, the sources or your genetics, you're looking in the wrong place. Because the biggest threats to your peptide results usually aren't the things that you inject. They're actually the everyday stuff that you're already doing. By the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly which things are actually canceling your results, even if you have some badass peptide stacks. I'm gonna be honest with you here. I'm Dr. Jones, DC, and I coach thousands of peptide patients alongside our prescribing medical team, BPC 157, TV 500, growth hormone secretagogue peptides, fat loss peptides, GLP-1 meds. And I can tell you from experience that when someone says, my peptide stopped working, 9 times out of 10, the peptide itself is fine, the stack is fine, it's their environment that's been quietly fighting it the whole time. Peptide therapy success is just getting the right compound at the right dose. And that matters, don't get me wrong, but I see patients on solid pharmacy-grade protocols still getting inconsistent results, not because the peptide failed, but because something in their day-to-day is sabotaging it before it ever gets a chance to work. So today, I'm gonna walk you through the 10 biggest enemies fighting your peptides right now. Now, I've grouped them into 4 categories: lifestyle assassins, chemical sabotages, behavioral bombs, and silent killers. And I guarantee at least 3 of these probably apply to you right now. See, here's the thing. The first category is going to surprise you because none of them are things that you do without even thinking. And they affect every single class of peptide: healing, fat loss, growth hormone, immune, all of them. So let's start with the stuff that's quietly crushing results before you even get to blame the vial. Okay, category 1, lifestyle assassins. So there are 3 things that I see tank peptide results more than almost anything else, and not a single one of them come in a bottle. Number 1 is the one that nobody talks about, and it might be the single biggest peptide killer out there: sleep debt. And I don't just mean sleep is important for your health. I mean, in our experience, it's extremely hard for peptides to do their job if your sleep isn't dialed in. See, here's why. If you're running a growth hormone boosting peptide, called growth hormone secretagogues like CJC-IPA, those peptides work by amplifying your body's natural growth hormone bursts or pulses. And when do those pulses happen? During deep sleep, the deepest stages, stages 3 and 4. So if you're getting 5 to 6 hours a night, or your sleep quality is terrible because you're on a phone until midnight, you're paying for a peptide signal that needs deep sleep to fire, and then removing the exact biology that it depends on. You can still get some results, and maybe you're happy with that. The results are gonna suffer and you're gonna spend a lot more money. And it's not just the growth hormone peptides. Healing peptides like BPC 157 and TV 500 do their best work when your overnight repair processes are running at full capacity. Immune peptides like thymosin alpha 1, patients respond better when sleep is dialed in. And fat loss peptides tend to respond better when your hormonal environment is stable, and quality sleep is a major part of that. So sleep debt doesn't just reduce your peptide results, it actively blocks the mechanisms that they depend on. I've had patients come to me convinced that their peptide stopped working. I remember this one patient who swore that everything was dialed in. This guy busted his ass. I mean, he was very neurotic. But then when we got down to it, he was in bed for 8 hours, but he got up, he woke up multiple times to go pee. And then when he went back to bed, he couldn't fall back asleep. His mind was racing about work things and relationship things. And he didn't realize that 8 hours in bed does not mean 8 hours quality sleep. I actually made him get one of these Oura rings, and it turns out he was getting about 4 hours of quality sleep. It was a disaster. So we had to do a whole protocol to fix that. But that's when his results actually started to kick in. We didn't change the compound or the dose. We fixed the patient's sleep and the results get better. Now, once sleep is handled, the next one that I look at is number 2, dehydration. And this one could be way more destructive than most people realize. Peptides dissolve in water. They travel through the watery part of your blood to reach the body parts that they're trying to affect. Now, when you're dehydrated, even mildly or chronically dehydrated, you've got less fluid in your bloodstream, which can mean less efficient delivery. Your peptide is in your body, but delivery to target tissues can be less efficient. And if you're on a GLP-1 medication like semaglutide or Zepatide, this gets even more serious. The FDA prescribing information for these medications specifically warns about low fluid levels and kidney stress. So if you're already slightly dehydrated and you're adding on a GLP-1 medication, that suppresses your appetite and makes you eat and drink less. You're compounding the problem, and it's something to be proactive about with your medical team. I've seen patients who've spent months thinking they just didn't respond to a peptide. We ran labs, looked at everything. The real issue was chronic mild dehydration, not hospitalization level. Just consistently not drinking enough water day after day quietly undermines everything that they were paying for. Now, this dehydration piece, especially if you're on a GLP-1 and you know your appetite and thirst cues are down, is making you wonder what else in your routine might be quietly fighting your peptides. This is why we offer free discovery calls, where you can speak with our patient educators who can look at your protocol and help you figure out what actually might be going on and get a sense of what it's like to work with me or my coaches, you can text the number on the screen, or you can check out the link in the descriptions if you want to explore that. Now first, let me show you the next lifestyle assassin that ruins results even when the peptide itself is solid. Number 3 is overtraining. Now this one's backwards, and it drives me crazy because people most likely use peptides, athletes, gym people, fitness-focused individuals, are the exact same people most likely to overtrain. And overtraining can work against their peptide results. Here's how it works. When you chronically overtrain, your cortisol levels stay elevated. Cortisol directly blocks growth hormone release, so your growth hormone secreting a peptide, it's trying to push growth hormone up while your stress hormone is actively pushing it back down. It also weakens immune system, which undermines immune peptides, and it creates a body-wide inflammatory storm that may compete with what healing peptides like BPC-157 are trying to do for your actual injury. So think about it this way. If you've got a torn rotator cuff and you're running BPC-157, but you're also doing 6 intense training sessions a week with no easy recovery week, without much recovery time, your body is spending resources managing the inflammation from your training instead of allocating as much towards repairing the actual injury. You're making it fight a war on 2 fronts. Now, what I observe all the time is that when we pull patients back, reduce training volume, add proper recovery days, their peptide responses actually improve. Not because we changed the protocol, because we stopped making the peptides fight uphill. So those are your 3 lifestyle assassins: sleep, debt, dehydration, and overtraining. If you're not sleeping, not hydrating, and training too hard or too often, it doesn't matter how good your compound is or where you sourced it, you're fighting your own investment. Now, if that connection is starting to hit home that the peptide problem is often an environmental problem, hit that subscribe button right now, because we put out 4 videos per week breaking down how to protect and optimize your peptide results with smarter protocols and fewer blind spots. Now let me get into category 2, because this is where people accidentally sabotage things without even realizing it. So I'm going to show you 4 substances that you might be mixing with your peptides right now that are doing serious damage. Okay, category 2, chemical sabotages. These are substances that you're mixing into your week while you're on your peptides, and they do more damage than you even realize. So number 4 is stacking stimulants. I'm talking layering caffeine, energy products, and this one trips people up because it doesn't feel like a problem. You take your pre-workout, you drink your coffee, maybe you've got an energy drink in the afternoon, it's just caffeine, right? No big deal. Except here's what's actually happening. High dose stimulants spike your cortisol and adrenaline, which is your fight or flight hormone. Elevated cortisol directly opposes growth hormone secreting signaling. So if you're injecting CJC IPA at night and then slamming 400 milligrams of caffeine across the day, you're chemically undoing what the peptide is trying to do. Now here's what I hear all the time from patients. I got anxious, my heart was racing, I thought it was the peptide. We look at their intake and most of the time it's not the peptide, it's the stimulant environment that you've created around it. See, timing matters. There's a massive difference between caffeine 4 hours before your injection versus 30 minutes before. Same molecule, completely different hormonal environment. Now, number 5 is on the thumbnail, so you probably expected it, but here's what you didn't know. Alcohol suppresses growth hormone release, and it's not just while you're drinking. Research shows that blunted GH output can extend well beyond that night. Not sleep it off and you're fine. GH signaling can stay disrupted long after the hangover is gone. And it's not just growth hormone. Alcohol taxes your liver. And when your liver is busy processing alcohol, that's energy and resources that your body can't use for everything else that it's trying to do. That works against the environment that healing peptides need to do their best work. And it disrupts the sleep structure that we just talked about in number 1. So now it's compounding multiple enemies at once. This isn't just about binge drinking either. I've seen patients who've had 2 or 3 drinks a few times a week, moderate by most standards, and when they did a 30-day alcohol elimination, their peptide results accelerated without changing a single other thing. Same compound, same dose, same training, remove the alcohol, and their results come roaring back. Now number 6 is the one that I think will shock most people. NSAIDs, those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, meaning over-the-counter, right? Your ibuprofen, your naproxens, the stuff that almost every peptide user reaches for and never has a second thought. See, here's the problem. If you're running BPC for a joint injury, a gut issue, or any kind of tissue repair, BPC-157 works through repair pathways involving nitric oxide, which is a blood flow signal. And it drives new blood vessel formation. NSAIDs block a key inflammatory enzyme called the COX enzyme to reduce inflammation, but they also cause tissue damage, especially in the gut. And BPC-157 actually spends part of its energy counteracting the NSAID-induced damage instead of focusing purely on repair. So think about what that means. You've got an injury, you're using BPC 157 to repair it, and then you pop Advil for the pain. Now the BPC 157 has to also combat what the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug is doing to the injury. What we started doing with patients is switching them off NSAIDs and onto targeted anti-inflammatory strategies that don't interfere with how BPC 157 works. And the differences in response is dramatic. Number 7 is processed and inflammatory foods. And this is the one that starts to connect everything, okay? You're spending hundreds of dollars a month on peptides designed to reduce inflammation, accelerate healing, and optimize your hormonal environment. And then you start eating seed oils, processed sugars, and fast food regularly. Your peptides are bailing water while your diet is punching new holes in the boat. This can affect multiple classes of peptides. Inflammatory foods create whole body-wide inflammation. And in our experience, that's a harder environment for healing peptides to work in. They can interfere with your growth hormone signaling, they can disrupt normal immune function, and they drive insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is the root problem behind most stubborn fat loss and inflammation, which works against what fat loss peptides were trying to do to begin with. So here's how I explain this to patients. Peptides are force multipliers. That's one of the most important things that I teach. They multiply whatever foundation you give them, your sleep, your nutrition, your training, and your metabolic state. You give them a solid foundation, good nutrition, proper sleep, smart training, and they multiply those results. But you give them a bad foundation, processed foods, chronic inflammation, suboptimal sleep, lots of stress, and they multiply that dysfunction. And they multiply something very minimal. So again, moderate to low results is what I see in those situations. So if you've been running a peptide protocol and the results feel random, amazing one week, but nothing the next, look at what you ate those weeks. I bet the pattern will start to become more obvious. Now, the food and timing piece goes a lot deeper than I can cover in this video. If you want me to make a complete video breaking down exactly what and when to eat around your peptide injections, timing for growth hormone secretagogue peptides versus healing peptides versus fat loss peptides, let me know in the comments if that would be helpful, and that'll be coming up soon. Okay. Everything so far has been about what's going into your body, but I want to shift gears here because the next two are different. They're about what you're doing with your protocols, the decisions that you're making about how to run your peptides, and number 8 is the single most common thing that I see destroying peptide investments. And the people doing it think that they're being smart. So category 3, behavior bombs. These are protocol decisions that silently destroy your results. Number 8 is what I call the everything stack. And if you're the kind of person who's running 3, 4, 5 peptides and at the same time, plus HRT, plus a new supplement stack that you heard about on a podcast, plus you just changed your diet last week, this one's for you. See, the problem is when you change everything at once, you can't tell what actually caused the improvement. You feel different, maybe better, maybe worse, maybe just weird, but you have zero idea of which change is responsible. That's not smart biohacking, that's just guessing with needles. And I see this pattern constantly. A patient comes in running a protocol that they cobbled together from Reddit threads and podcast clips, and they're on BPC 157, ipamorelin, maybe some AOD, and they added a new pre-workout, they're trying the carnivore diet, and they feel off. They want to know what's causing it. And the honest answer is nobody can tell you. Not me, not any doctor. You've got too many variables and no control. So here's what to do instead. Start with your foundation. Add 1 to 2 variables depending. Give it 4 to 6 weeks. Measure the response, maybe labs, maybe body composition, how you feel. And then and only then do you add the next thing. It's a slower process. It requires more effort, but you actually know what's working. And the patients who strip back to 1 or 2 peptides on a clean foundation consistently get better results than the ones running a 5 peptide stack with no structure. More is not necessarily more when you can't track what's doing what. Speaking of stacking, if you want me to create a complete guide, a video breakdown of which peptides actually stack well together and which ones cancel each other out, let me know in the comments if that would be helpful, and we can add that one to the upcoming videos. Okay, number 9 is an extreme diet swing. And this one hits people who are bouncing between strict keto for 2 weeks and then falling off and eating everything in sight, then restarting on Monday with a new plan. Maybe it's the same plan. Here's why this kills your peptides. Growth hormone peptides need low insulin, fasted or semi-fasted windows to work optimally. Fat loss peptides need metabolic consistency to do their job. And when your metabolic environment is swinging wildly from deep ketosis to high carb and back, especially if you're already insulin resistant, your peptides never get a stable platform to work with. Now, I'm actually a fan of a cyclic ketogenic lifestyle, but that only works when you're metabolically healthy. You gotta get healthy for you to be able to have the erratic swings, which can actually be optimal then, but it's actually detrimental when you're insulin resistant. What I've observed is that dietary consistency predicts peptide response better than which specific diet someone ends up following. I'd rather have a patient eating a solid, consistent 80% clean diet every day than someone who's perfect for 5 days and then a disaster for 3, perfect for 4, and then a disaster for 2. The peptide doesn't need perfection, it needs a stable environment to amplify. Okay, everything that we've covered so far, the lifestyle assassins, the chemical sabotages, the behavior bombs, all of that is about what's happening inside your body and your protocols. But the last one is different, because this one can mean that the peptide that you're injecting right now is already destroyed before it ever hits your bloodstream. The last category, the silent killers. And I only need one for this one because it's that important. Number 10 is storage and handling errors. And this is the one that makes me the most frustrated because it means the peptide was dead before you ever pushed the plunger. Peptides are fragile protein chains. Heat degrades them, UV light damages them, bacterial contamination from reused needles or sloppy reconstitution can render them completely useless or less effective. And here's the thing that I always tell patients, heat, not time, is the primary enemy. A peptide stored properly in your refrigerator at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius can last weeks, sometimes months. The same peptide left on your bathroom counter in a summer hot day, in a hot summer day, could degrade rapidly. So quick rules, this is what I tell patients. Refrigerate immediately after you mix it. Middle shelf, not the door. Always use alcohol prep pads and fresh needles every single time. And before every injection, look at the solution. If it's cloudy, yellow, or has particles floating in it, in our clinic, we consider that discard situation. That's not your peptides anymore. Now, before I let you go, here are 3 quick bonus factors that explain a lot of mystery non-responses. Okay, number 1, injection site rotation. If you're injecting the same spot every time, you're building scar tissue that reduces absorption. How much actually gets into your body? That's why we tell our patients they have to rotate. Second, timing inconsistencies. If you're injecting at random times every day, you're undermining the pulse style protocols that depend on rhythm. In general, I have patients pick a time and they just stick with it. Third, unrealistic timelines. Now, some peptides take 4 to 8 weeks to show results that you can actually measure. And if you're switching compounds at week 2 because you don't feel anything yet, you never really gave it the chance that it needed. So there it is, the 10 biggest enemies fighting your peptides, plus 3 more that explain most of the mystery. And what all of that really comes down to is this: your peptides didn't stop working. Your peptide didn't fail you. Something in your environment, your habits, your handling, or your protocol is actually fighting against it. Fix the environment, the sleep, the nutrition, the stress, and your metabolic foundation, and the peptide does what it was always designed to do. Now, real quick before I go, if you're running a peptide protocol right now and you're not sure whether it actually is working the way that it should, that's exactly the situation that I see all the time in our coaching department. So let me show you what we do when someone's results feel inconsistent. Now, if you want to take this a step further, if you watch this whole video and you're realizing that your sleep, your diet, your stimulant intake, your stacking strategy, or maybe your storage habits might be the reason that your peptides haven't been delivering, that's exactly the kind of thing that we help people sort out. We work with patients every day who are getting inconsistent results, and once we look at the full picture, the protocol, the lifestyle, the variables that nobody else was paying attention to, everything starts to click. So if you want help figuring out what's actually fighting your results and building a protocol that works with your life instead of against it, you can either text the number on the screen or you can check out the link in the description. You'll get to speak with one of our patient educators who will go through your history, what you've tried, what's worked and what hasn't, and what your long-term goals actually are. And then they're going to give you an idea of what it's like to work with me, my coaches, my medical team, and then they're going to go over programs and pricing so that you have a clear picture of what long-term success actually looks like. Now, if you haven't already checked out that video here, this is where I break down the top peptides for 2026. So go check that out right now. We'll see you later.